Hello everyone, today we will discuss what it is that conservatives fear. Some might think that conservatives fear change, but obviously that is not the distinctive definition of conservatives, because all of us fear change to some degree or another, and there are changes that conservatives support. So what is it that conservatives fear? That is liminality, the concept which we will discuss today, after we discuss what are conservatives, what is conservatism, a topic that is actually made more complicated by the fact we refer to two different things with the same word. But first, please like and subscribe to the channel, as it helps the channel and these videos get to more people. Second, we need to discuss the rules of engagement as we do every episode. 1. Watch the segment to the end. 2. Comparisons don't mean I find things equal. 3. Not all arguments are intended to be equally good. 4. I'm not trying to convince you. 5. Assume what I say unsourced is preceded by I think or in my opinion. 6. Most questions aren't rhetorical. Finally, this slide and my reading of it must appear when you are reacting to or showing an argument for my videos. Context matters, and this slide helps remind people of that. You can pause the video to go over the rules in more details, and as always, there will be a link in the description to a video where I actually go over each of the rules and explain it more thoroughly, as well as the theoretical framework which these rules depict. So what are conservatives? First of all, these arrows depict time. We have the future going to our right, the past going to our left, and the present is marked by this blue dot. The reason the blue dot isn't in the center between the two lines is because these arrows also symbolize the direction of change a society is undergoing. There is always some sort of change that is happening, and the present, or conservatives as we shall soon see, stand just beyond the direction we are currently moving in. But that is the present. The arrow stretching back showcases that we are already in the course of some sort of change happening. So conservatives now is perfect. In the theoretical sense, which is what we will discuss first, conservatives are proponents of stasis and opponents of change. Now is perfect. They don't want to go forward with more change, and they also don't want to change to how things used to be. Progressives, the future is perfect. They like the change of a direction that society is currently undergoing, and they want that change to continue to happen. Reactionaries are the counterpart to progressives. They think the past is perfect. They see the direction of a change that society is undergoing, and they would like to reverse that direction. There is no value judgment to each of these categories, and there is no inherent value except wanting change or wanting to oppose change. And I guess reactionaries want, you could say, either, because they oppose the current change and champion changing to how things used to be. In case you are part of a Western culture, as we shall soon discuss, there are specific values that each of these groups uphold, but in the theoretical framework, that is not the case. For instance, if you look at Iran and its Islamic revolution, if you look a year or two after it happened, progressives there want things to become more religious and less liberal, while the reactionaries in post-Islamic revolution Iran want things to return to being more open to the world, more secular, and less religious and totalitarian. So don't assume that progressives here means liberal, and reactionaries or conservatives mean the same thing as, let's say, the Republican Party in the United States. And this is just a theoretical framework of what sort of change each group desires or doesn't desire. See, this is the pure theoretical framework, and now we are going to talk about the real world, which is contingent in this case on the Western culture. Conservatives are traditionalists. That doesn't necessarily mean much because, again, which tradition? If a country's tradition is liberalism, then it is one thing. But in our real world here, we usually discuss these things in Western culture terms. So traditionalists like things that tend to be slightly less progressive. Progressives champion liberalism, and reactionaries, true to their name, rather than championing a specific thing, are more defined as being anti another thing, anti-liberalism. So what is the difference between conservatives and reactionaries? First of all, it is a difference of how you approach things. A difference not simply of beliefs, but of methodology. For instance, if we look at the American Supreme Court in recent years, or in current times, in the entire history of the United States until recent years, the Supreme Court has only added rights to groups and people, but the current Supreme Court, for the first time, has actually repealed rights that had been given previously. So the current Supreme Court is reactionary because it opposes the values that progressives or liberals have championed and achieved. A traditionalist, though, would not support repealing any rights and would more likely champion not expanding rights further and trying to affect change little by little. So that is the difference between traditionalists or conservatives and reactionaries, which are anti-liberalists. Put another way, the current Supreme Court, both liberals and anti-liberals in the Supreme Court generally tend to support judicial activism, where you enact change and change the way things are, while a conservative is more opposed to changing things and is against judicial activism. They want to avoid rocking the boat. So that is the difference between progressives, reactionaries, and conservatives. So now let us discuss what it is that conservatives fear. Obviously, conservatives, in the pure or theoretical sense, fear change of all sorts. But as most people can tell you, change is scary. It's not as if progressives champion all change. They are opposed to the reactionary change, and reactionaries are opposed to the progressive change. And it is not that conservatives are against all change. If you would give them $1 million, they wouldn't be opposed to it. So it is not change in and of itself that is scary to them, just as it isn't all sorts of change that progressives and reactionaries wholeheartedly support. So what is it that conservatives fear? That brings us to the main topic of today's episode, liminality. Liminality is a concept in anthropology devised and developed by Arnold van Gennep, who wrote The Rites of Passage in 1909, and Victor Turner, who wrote The Forest of Symbols, Aspects of Ndembu Ritual in 1967, and liminality is the state of being on the threshold of change, where you are dissociated from where you used to be, but are not still at your destination. The classic sense of liminality described in anthropology is a rite of passage, where you transition from being, for instance, a child into being an adult. There are other forms of liminality, such as the transition from life to death, or from being a bachelor to being a married person, and more. Liminality is also associated with feeling ambiguity or disorientation, as we are in a sort of limbo, whether it be a mental limbo, an emotional limbo, or one of social standing. Liminality can also be used to describe something that is blurring the lines, that is crossing the threshold or is straddling it. For instance, a werewolf blurs the lines between a human and beast, So it is an example of a liminal being. Witches or witch doctors also tend to be beings that exist in a liminal state, as they are exiles from our society. They exist both inside our society and outside it. They help people straddle the lines between health and sickness, life and death. They often also acted as midwives, which is another liminal state between being born is in and of itself a liminal state. Ambiguity is an uncomfortable stage for people to exist in. Change is usually not scary in and of itself. What is scary about change is that we go from knowing where we stand, how we're supposed to behave, what is going to happen, to not knowing, to a state of uncertainty. We don't know our position relative to others. We don't know how others are going to react to us. We don't know what the future will bring. But uncertainty, not change in and of itself, is what is scary about change. So what is it that conservatives fear? What conservatives fear is that uncertainty. And liminality brings forth that uncertainty. It is an integral part of the experience, of a definition. So let's look at some examples of liminality in modern society. Transgenders, homosexuals. If in the past a romantic relationship, must always be between a man and a woman, then upsetting that cultural structure turns homosexuals into a liminal group, and homosexuality is blurring the boundaries, undoing the certainty of a social structure of a romantic relationship, of a parental unit, of a family. And yes, if you cast your mind back 50, 60 years, when many of the same arguments made against homosexual couples were also made against divorced couples for very much the same reasons of destroying the traditional family structure. Transgenders are even more liminal, and genderqueer people as well, because they take the binary and classic distinction between male and female, between men and women, and they say, no, you can actually cross between the two, or even more, not just cross, you can be between them, somewhere in the middle, or not necessarily in the middle, but somewhere on the continuum. They turn the binary distinction into a spectrum. And that spectrum means that we are all on a spectrum, but there is no cut and dry distinction. And that is liminality, that disorientation, that ambiguity. And I posit that it is this that conservatives are actually trying to undo, trying to oppose. It is not change in and of itself. It is not the liberal values that they oppose. It is this feeling of not knowing where they stand, of the undermining of distinctions. And the current liberal values are not building new distinctions, which the conservatives could find their place in which case they would merely be favoring the traditional distinctions over the new ones. No, it is categories versus spectrums, or malleable categories that you can cross back and forth between as you please. So what conservatives desire is certainty, and it is the uncertainty that they oppose. Now, reactionaries do try to bring back the old categories. So when it comes to conservative values, reactionaries do hold the same values as conservatives, but the way they go about them is different, which is the main distinction in our contingent and actual world. But you could say in this sense that the value of progressives rather than liberalism is shades of gray, while conservatives cling to black and white, and reactionaries try to undo the shades of gray that exist. So that is, in my opinion, what it is that conservatives fear. Well, both conservatives and reactionaries operate from a sense of unease or fear. The difference is between fearing uncertainty, which is a very human feeling, and it can be value judgment agnostic about the progressive values. They simply dislike the impact on their ability to perceive their place in theoretical space, and reactionaries who oppose the values that progressives espouse. Now, this episode was a bit more theoretical, but if you would like to see what I do with this framework, or perhaps see me explain more such topics, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and if you can, share the video with others whom you think might like it, and drop a comment. You can also support the channel via the affiliate link for Amazon or my Patreon, both linked in the description. And until next time, be well and do good.